Every conversation has more than one layer. On the surface, people hear your words. They listen to your argument, your explanation, your answer, your story. But underneath that, something else is happening. They are reading your state. They notice how fast you speak. They feel the tension in your voice. They sense when you are trying too hard to be liked, believed, or accepted. Even when they cannot explain it, their mind is picking up signals from your face, your posture, your timing, your breathing, and the way you handle silence. This is why two people can say the exact same sentence, but create completely different reactions. One person says it, and the room listens. Another person says it, and somehow the words feel weak. The difference is not always the sentence. Sometimes it is the nervous system behind the sentence. Most people think confidence is something they need to perform. They try to sound stronger, stand taller, speak louder, or dominate the conversation. But real confidence is quieter than that. It is not about forcing people to see you as powerful. It is about not leaking the signs that you feel powerless. Because the moment someone senses that you are emotionally dependent on their reaction, the dynamic changes. If they can tell you are waiting for approval, they can withhold it. If they can tell you are afraid of disagreement, they can challenge you just to watch you defend yourself. If they can tell silence makes you uncomfortable, they can stay quiet and let you start over-explaining. This is the hidden game inside many conversations. It is not only about who has the better argument, it is about who stays grounded when the pressure rises. You can see this clearly in The Godfather through Michael Corleone. At the beginning, Michael is not the loudest person in the family. He does not perform dominance the way Sonny does. He does not explode, threaten, or constantly prove himself. But as the story develops, his power comes from restraint. He watches more than he speaks. He pauses before he acts. He does not waste emotion in front of people who might use it against him. That is what makes him frightening. Not because he is loud, but because he becomes unreadable. Other men in the story reveal themselves through anger, ego, panic, or impulsiveness. Michael learns to hide the emotional buttons that others could press. And once he does that, the room starts responding to him differently. That is the lesson. When your inner state is too visible, people know where to push. They know what makes you nervous. They know what makes you defensive. They know what kind of reaction they can pull out of you. And once someone can pull a reaction out of you on command, they have more control over the conversation than you do. This does not mean you should become cold or fake. A person who acts emotionless is usually just performing another kind of insecurity. The goal is not to become a statue. The goal is to become harder to move emotionally. A grounded person can care about the conversation without chasing the outcome. They can make a point without immediately checking if everyone approves. They can be challenged without rushing to defend themselves. They can ask a question and wait long enough for the real answer to appear. That is presence. Presence is what people feel when your words, tone, and body all communicate the same message. You are not afraid of the moment. And that is where influence begins. Before you learn how to persuade, negotiate, lead, or command respect, you have to stop giving away the signs that you need the other person to validate you. Because people are always reading you whether you like it or not. One of the easiest ways to lose power in a conversation is so small that most people never notice it. You make a point. It is clear. It is reasonable. Maybe it is even strong. Then, right after saying it, you look for approval. Does that make sense? You know what I mean, right? On the surface, it sounds harmless. Sometimes it is harmless. But when it comes from nervousness, people can feel it. The words are not the real problem. The need behind the words is. Because what you are really saying is, please confirm that what I just said was acceptable. That one moment changes the relationship between you and the other person. You are no longer standing behind your own point. You are handing it to them and waiting for permission to feel confident about it. This is why approval seeking is so dangerous. It turns the listener into the judge, and it turns you into someone waiting for a grade. Confident people do not communicate that way. They do not throw out an idea and immediately chase validation for it. They say what they mean, then give the other person space to absorb it. That space matters. A strong point needs room to land. When you rush to soften it, explain it again, or check whether they agree, you weaken the effect. You make it look like you do not trust your own words enough to let them stand. This does not mean you should never ask questions. The difference is the frame. A weak question asks for approval. A strong question invites perspective. Instead of nervously asking, "Does that make sense?" you can pause and ask, "How do you see it?" Or, "What are your thoughts on that?" That small shift changes everything. Now you are not begging them to validate you. You are calmly opening the conversation. The point is not to become cold or arrogant. It is to stop making your confidence dependent on someone else's reaction. Say the point. Let it breathe. Then ask from curiosity, not insecurity. Because once people sense that you need their approval, they begin to feel power over you. But when you can speak clearly and remain steady afterward, your presence becomes much harder to shake. The third sign is speed. Not how fast you can speak when you are excited, but how fast you speak when you feel pressure. That is where people reveal themselves. When someone starts talking faster and faster, especially after being questioned, the message underneath the words becomes obvious. They are trying to control the outcome. They need the other person to agree, to approve, to buy in, to stop resisting. And people can feel that immediately. You have probably experienced this before. Someone is explaining an offer, defending an idea, pitching a product, or trying to convince you of something. At first, you may listen, but then their pace starts climbing. They stack one argument on top of another. They do not leave space for you to think. They keep filling the air because silence feels dangerous to them. And suddenly, you are no longer listening to the message. You are listening to their need. That is why fast talking often creates resistance. It makes the other person feel pushed. Even if the words are intelligent, the energy feels desperate. This is one reason The Wolf of Wall Street is such a useful example. Jordan Belfort's entire world runs on speed. Fast words, fast money, fast pressure, fast emotional decisions. The salesmen are trained to overwhelm people before they can slow down and think. The pace itself becomes part of the manipulation. But that kind of speed has a cost. It may create excitement. It may create urgency. It may even create short-term compliance. But it rarely creates real trust. Because when someone feels rushed, their guard goes up. A part of them starts asking, "Why does this person need me to decide so quickly? Why are they pushing so hard?" That question is deadly in any conversation. The more you rush, the more you look attached. The more attached you look, the more power the other person feels they have over you. Calm people create the opposite effect. They do not hurry every sentence. They allow a thought to land before adding another one. They are not afraid of a pause after a question. Their pace tells you, "I am not chasing you. I am not dependent on your reaction. I can stay steady whether you agree or not." It is what makes slower speech powerful. It is not about sounding dramatic or artificial. It is about giving your nervous system enough control that your words do not look like they are running ahead of you. A useful rule is simple. When you feel the urge to explain more, slow down first. Do not add 5 more reasons. Do not rush into another argument. Ask one clean question. What is your perspective on that? How are you seeing this right now? What part of this feels unclear to you? This changes the rhythm of the conversation. Instead of pushing information at someone, you invite them to reveal where they actually are. And that gives you something far more valuable than forced agreement. It gives you truth. Because the person who talks too fast is usually trying to escape discomfort. But the person who can slow down under pressure shows control. The fourth sign appears when the conversation stops being comfortable. Someone questions your idea. They push back on your price. They disagree with your opinion. They look at you with doubt instead of approval. And suddenly, your body reacts before your mind has time to think. Your voice gets tighter. Your pace increases. Your posture changes. You start explaining too quickly. You may not explode, but you shift. And that shift tells the other person something important. They found a pressure point. This is where many people lose control. Not because they were wrong, but because they became defensive. Defensiveness is dangerous because it confirms that the challenge affected you. When someone says, "That is too expensive," and you immediately start listing every reason why the price is fair, you think you are protecting your position. But often, you are weakening it. You are showing that the price needs to be defended. The same thing happens in arguments. Someone questions your decision, and you rush to prove yourself. Someone criticizes your work, and you immediately explain your intention. Someone doubts your character, and you try to convince them that they misunderstood. The more reactive you become, the more power they gain, because now they know how to move you. A calm person handles pressure differently. They do not treat every challenge like an attack. They treat it like information. Instead of rushing to defend, they pause long enough to understand what is really behind the pushback. That pause is important. Even 1 second can change the entire emotional direction of the conversation. It gives your nervous system time to catch up. It stops you from answering from fear. It keeps you from handing the other person control over your state. Then, instead of defending, you ask, "What concerns you about that? What makes you see it that way? What is behind that question?" These questions do something powerful. They move the conversation away from combat and toward clarity. Now the other person has to reveal what they actually mean. Maybe their objection is real. Maybe it is emotional. Maybe they are testing your confidence. Maybe they do not even fully understand their own resistance yet. But you will never find that out if you react too quickly. The mistake is thinking confidence means having an immediate answer for everything. It does not. Sometimes confidence is the ability to stay quiet for 1 extra second while everyone expects you to panic. That is what separates reaction from control. A reactive person tries to win the moment. A controlled person studies the moment. The 5th sign is over-explaining. This one is dangerous because it does not feel like weakness when you are doing it. It feels like effort. It feels like you are being clear, logical, helpful. You believe that if you can just give one more reason, one more example, one more detail, the other person will finally understand. But that is usually not what happens. The more you try to force someone to accept your point, the more their mind starts defending itself against you. They stop listening to understand. They start listening to resist. This is why over-explaining often has the opposite effect. Instead of making you sound more believable, it can make you sound less certain. A strong point does not need to be dragged across the floor and defended from every possible angle. When you keep explaining after the message is already clear, people begin to sense that you are not just communicating, you are trying to be believed. And that need changes the atmosphere. You can see this clearly in Crime and Punishment. Raskolnikov is not exposed only by evidence. He's exposed by his own psychological pressure. His thoughts circle around themselves. His explanations become tangled. He tries to control how people see him, but the more he tries to manage the impression, the more unstable he appears. That is the trap. When someone is calm, they can say less. When someone is guilty, insecure, or desperate to be accepted, they often say too much. Their words begin working against them. The same thing happens in ordinary conversations. You give your opinion, and someone does not immediately agree, so you add another reason, then another, then an example, then a personal story. Before long, the original point is buried under your need to prove it. At that point, the other person is no longer weighing the idea. They are feeling your pressure, and pressure creates resistance. This is why persuasion is not about flooding someone with information. Most people are not unconvinced because they lack facts. They are unconvinced because they do not yet feel safe enough, open enough, or personally connected enough to consider what you are saying. More talking does not solve that. Better timing does. Better questions do. A calmer frame does. So the move is simple but uncomfortable. Say the point clearly once, then stop. Let the sentence stand on its own. Do not rush to decorate it. Do not bury it under explanations. Do not panic just because the other person has not reacted yet. After that, turn the conversation back to them. Ask, how does that compare to what you have experienced? Or what part of that feels off to you? Or where do you see it differently? Now you are not trying to drag them into your conclusion. You are letting them reveal their own. That matters because people trust an idea more when they feel they arrived at it themselves. The sixth sign is nervous movement. This is one of the most revealing signals because it happens before you can edit it. You may control your words. You may prepare the perfect sentence. You may know exactly what you want to say. But if your body is restless, your confidence starts leaking through the cracks. A tapping foot, a hand touching the face, constant shifting in the chair, playing with a pen, nodding too much, looking away at the wrong moment. Small movements like these may seem meaningless, but they tell a different story underneath the conversation. They tell the other person that your nervous system is not settled. And people feel that. They may not consciously think, he touched his neck, so he must be uncomfortable. That is not how it works. The judgment happens faster than language. Their brain simply receives the overall impression: uncertain, tense, unstable, unsure. This is why body language can destroy a message before the message is even judged. One of the most famous examples is the 1960 televised debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon.
Government is comparable. Secondly, I think the question is, what are the programs that we advocate?
The family had made recommendations, as I have made them through the years, to him which he has accepted or rejected.
On substance, Nixon was experienced, intelligent, and politically strong. People who heard the debate on radio often thought he performed well, but television changed everything. Kennedy looked calm, composed, and physically prepared. Nixon, by contrast, appeared tired, uncomfortable, and tense. Under the lights, his physical presentation worked against him. The lesson was brutal. People do not only hear your argument, they watch the body carrying it. That same principle plays out in everyday life. In a meeting, someone may have the better idea, but if they keep fidgeting while presenting it, the idea feels weaker. In a negotiation, someone may have a strong position, but if their hands keep moving nervously, the other side senses pressure. In a difficult conversation, someone may be telling the truth, but if their body looks unsettled, the truth becomes harder to trust. This does not mean you should become stiff or robotic. That creates a different kind of discomfort. The goal is not to freeze your body. The goal is to remove unnecessary movement. There is a difference between intentional movement and nervous discharge. Intentional movement supports the message. Nervous movement distracts from it. A controlled gesture can make a point feel stronger. 10 restless gestures make the person look like they are trying to escape the moment. That is why stillness has power. Not dead stillness, not forced stillness, but grounded stillness. The kind that makes it clear you are present, listening, and not afraid of the pressure in the room. A useful exercise is simple. Record yourself speaking. Turn the sound off. Watch only your body. Most people are surprised by what they see. They discover how often they nod for approval, shift when challenged, smile when uncomfortable, or move their hands when silence appears. That awareness alone can change everything. Because once you see the signal, you can begin to control it. When someone else is speaking, stop preparing your escape. Be present. Let your body show that you are actually listening. When you gesture, make it deliberate. When there is pressure, do not rush to release it through movement. Let the room feel your composure. The seventh sign is interrupting. And this one is tricky, because in the moment, interrupting can feel like control. You think you are taking charge. You think you are keeping the conversation moving. You think you already know where the other person is going, so you jump in before they finish. But that is not how it feels on the other side. To the person speaking, interruption does not feel like confidence. It feels like dismissal. It tells them, what I want to say is more important than what you are trying to explain. Once people feel that, they start protecting themselves. They may keep talking, but they stop opening up. They become careful, they give shorter answers. They hide the real objection, the real emotion, the real reason behind what they are saying. And that is where you lose access to the truth. This matters because most conversations are not won by having the fastest response. They are won by understanding what is actually happening beneath the words. A person may say, "I need to think about it," but that may not be the real issue. They may say it is too expensive, but the deeper concern may be trust. They may disagree with your idea, but what they are really reacting to is how pressured they feel. You will never find that out if you keep cutting them off. Interrupting usually comes from impatience or ego. You are not listening to understand. You are waiting for your chance to prove something. And the more you try to prove yourself, the less safe the other person feels telling you the truth. But there is a difference between interrupting and guiding. Interrupting is when you cut someone off because you want control. Guiding is when you step in because the conversation needs clarity. For example, if someone starts drifting into a long tangent or gives a vague answer that does not really address the question, silence may not help. In that moment, you can calmly bring them back, not with force, with precision. You might say, "Go back for a second. When you said that, what did you mean?" Or, "I want to understand that part more clearly." Or, "When you say it does not feel right, what specifically feels off?" That kind of interjection does not make the other person feel ignored. It makes them feel studied. It shows that you are listening closely enough to catch the important detail. That is the difference. One cuts the person off, the other pulls the truth out. Before you speak over someone, ask yourself one question. Am I jumping in because I need to prove my point? Or because I genuinely need clarity? That question will expose your intention immediately. If the impulse is coming from insecurity, stay quiet. Let them finish. Give them enough room to reveal themselves. Because the person who interrupts too quickly often looks nervous, even when they are trying to look powerful. They seem unable to tolerate the other person's words. They seem controlled by the need to respond. But the person who can listen without rushing shows something stronger. They show discipline, and discipline creates authority.